I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to the Conversation with Al McFarlane. Today is Friday, January 20th, 2023. And today we talk about health and healing. We're pleased to have friends and colleagues. We actually call this the Healing Circle. Our colleague, Dr. B, is not here right now, but our regular Dr. Oliver Williams is here, and we're pleased to be joined also by Mother Atum Azzahir. One of the themes we'll talk about today for the main part of the program is the Black Legacy and Leadership Initiative, Enrichment Initiative Wellness Grant. We want to dig into that deeply. But that leads us to the opportunity to talk about all things mental health. It's a topic that our community is becoming, I think, more willing and more amenable to discussing. You hear it in ordinary conversation where men in particular, and I'll say including Al McFarlane, talk about the value, the need, the benefit of paying attention to mental health and engaging without shame leaders and experts and professionals in therapy to help clarify, to ground, and to focus your attention on being a successful human being. Well, so it's something that I think is really important. Before I get into that, I want to remind you that this program is a way for us to be together, to talk to each other, talk to the world about our point of view. And we've got a role for you to play in that as well. And that is go to YouTube, the Insight News channel in YouTube, and subscribe. We have a goal of getting 1,000 subscribers in fairly short order. We've got maybe 200 or so now, and you've got a part to play in helping us reach that goal. If you've got a network of people that might be interested in conversations like this, in community like this, ask them to join the show, to watch the show, to subscribe to the channel, and to share it and like it and share it with their friends. So that's the call to action right now. Go to Insight YouTube, click on subscribe, become a subscriber, and then like the program and share. And you can also communicate with us there as well to let us know things you think we ought to be talking about, things you want to talk about with us on this program. Well, a couple of things. One is, in the news last night, you all saw Governor of Florida once again doing the crazy, I think, crazy, maybe I shouldn't be using that word, but that's kind of what came out. But his attitude, his pronouncements, his actions on education and teaching in an African-American AP course, he's rejecting the use of that course. I've got a video. Let's look at that real quick, and we'll talk about that first as a first hot topic, and I'll share a few more after that.
Administration is blocking an AP African-American Studies high school course, saying the class would violate state law.
I don't know what the basis of this thought is. It's downright painful to people of color.
This new college-level pilot course takes students from pre-colonial Africa to modern protest movements. In a letter to the College Board, which oversees AP courses, Florida's Department of Education rejected approval of the course, saying it's inexplicably contrary to Florida law and significantly lacks educational value, adding that if the course comes into compliance and incorporates historically accurate content, Florida Department of Education will always be willing to reopen the discussion. The rejection follows the governor's effort to limit discussion of race in school. Last year, DeSantis signed the Stop Woke Act, restricting race-based conversation and analysis in the business and education sectors. He's made other headline-making education moves as well. Signing the bill critics refer to as the Don't Say Gay law.
We will make sure that parents can send their kids to school to get an education, not in indoctrination.
But one state senator is raising questions about the AP course rejection, tweeting this list of all the other ethnic AP courses he says are offered in Florida and saying it's crazy how AP African American Studies made the chopping block in Florida. The course is already being taught in more than 60 schools across the country, with many more planned next school.
Well, there you have it. Interesting, disturbing, and one more arena in which our understanding, our awareness, our story, our narrative is being discounted, marginalized. Over the course of the program, I'll ask my guests to weigh in on what we think about that. But I have other hot topics today, and among them One that is a concern that reflects concern is that CNN is reporting in their health section that there have been over their new 988 crisis line, their mental health crisis line, is seeing an eye-opening rise in calls and texts and chats in the first 6 months of its existence. And I'll just read a paragraph or two. So since the summer launch of the 988 Suicide Crisis Lifeline, the new 3-digit number has seen significant rise in call volume, routing more than 2 million calls, texts, and chat messages to call centers, with the majority being answered in under a minute. The average speed to answer year over year was about 3 minutes since in 2021. Now it's 44 seconds since December of 2022, says Dr. John Palmieri, a senior medical advisor to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, who's deputy director of the project. Well, here's the point. The 988 Suicide and Crisis Helpline, formerly known as the Suicide Prevention Lifeline, just launched last July. And the concern is the massive uptick. I wonder what that's about. We'll talk about that in the course of today's program as well. Another hot topic, there's a report that we have called The State of Mental Health in America. And it's got, in summary, it's like a 50-page report or longer. But the key findings in that report include these: that 21% of adults are experiencing mental illness. That's equivalent to over 50 million Americans. It says that 15% of adults had a substance use disorder in the past year, and that among those, 93.5% did not receive treatment. Another startling fact: the percentage of adults reporting serious thoughts of suicide is now at 4.8%. That's over 12.1 million adults. 11% of adults who identify with two or more races, reported serious thoughts of suicide. That's interesting. 16% of youth reported suffering from at least one major depressive episode in the past year. That means more than 2.7 million youth are experiencing severe major depression. 55% of adults with mental illness receive no treatment. That's 28 million people. Staggering numbers. 11% of adults with mental illness are uninsured. And 60% of youth with major depression do not receive mental health treatment. I've got 4 more data points here. In the U.S., there are 350 individuals for every one mental health provider. Also, 28% of all adults with mental illness report that they were not able to receive the treatment they needed. 23% of adults reported experiencing 14 or more mentally unhealthy days each month were not able to see a doctor due to cost. Finally, 1 in 10 youth with private insurance do not have coverage for mental health or emotional difficulties. That means over 1.2 million youth. That's a lot. That's a lot to be thinking about, a lot on our minds today. And with that, let me bring in our guest, our panelists today, our Elder Atum Azzahir and Dr. Oliver Williams. Both of you, welcome to the conversation. Good to see you again, as always. And I think that I covered all the things that I wanted to do in my hot topics list. I didn't. There's one more thing that I'll say before I bring you all in to comment on it, because I think you're going to be central to this conversation. I've got a report here from Yahoo News, from the Independent. It says, maybe we can show this: a mother in a mental health crisis and her children froze to death in a field. Froze to death in a field. Could it have been prevented? A picture of a woman and a child, and it says 2 days before Monica Kennedy and 2 of her children were found, well, 2 days before Monica Kennedy and 2 of her children were found frozen to death in a Michigan field, worried neighbors began alerting police to a family wandering in the area wearing clothes that couldn't possibly protect them from the unforgiving cold. The mother experienced a mental health crisis in the days leading up to the gruesome January 15th discovery and was convinced people were out to kill her. Police in Oakland County, Michigan, have said. She reportedly instructed her children, Lily, age 10, Kyle, 9, and Malik, 3, to hide if anyone approached them and told them to lie down and go to sleep in the field. Only Lily, age 10, would escape death from hypothermia, rushing to a nearby home to ask help after waking up next to the bodies of her mother and brothers. Well, there's more. I'm not going to read anymore. That's horrible, horrific. All of it, though, tells us that we have to pay attention and talk about what mental health is and what it means to us as a community, what our responsibilities are. And let me begin, Dr. Williams and Mother Atum Azzahir, just asking you to come in. Mother Atum, let's have a general discussion or your thoughts about health in our community, what the status. We talked about the country. It's a challenge for the country, probably for the world, but how do we pull that information in, wear it, and work through it to move towards being healed and productive human beings? Good afternoon, and thank you so much for being here as always.
Well, thank you so much, Brother Al. I think listening to everything from the decision that DeSantis made in Florida to the mother and her child being found frozen in a field. I guess I'd like first of all to make the point that those are connected points to be made, especially for people of African heritage. I think that the work that I find myself constantly being preoccupied with is what the sister refers to as post-traumatic slave syndrome. And I think that I am finding with myself and with others that it's hard work for me to get up in the morning. I have to work hard the night before and the night before that and the day before that. And part of the work includes the idea of going through my memories, for example. What are those memories of things gone past? What are the old memories that sometimes comes back and kick me in the side of my mind and then cause me to be worried or deeply afraid or cause me to feel that there are two kind of things going on in my head that sometimes make me feel like two people, and the two people are at odds with each other. So the two personalities or the two forces. At this point, I've begun to realize that they are forces. And these are the forces that, once again, I can see, and I'm beginning to really work very, very hard with each person that I'm with to deal with what is it that I now am doing that will be remembered, and in many, many cases locked away. If it's too brutal, that thing gets locked away and then it opens again at its own time and calling. So the emphasis that we're placing on the post-traumatic slave syndrome. Imagine what it's like to have all of these memories that have not been healed or opened or even brought to the light, that now the generations that are with us are beginning to, these things have been around so long, they have taken hold and they bring themselves forward. And many of us do not have the skill the capacity, the resiliency, because living with this for all the time that we have, we have to face the fact that our bodies keeps the score. And so if you think about your heart and you think about our lungs and these things, you also have to think about the mind and the brain as these organs that are weathered as a result of the post-traumatic slave syndrome, which is really us remembering generation back to generation back to generation, which is as we talk about the first time. So that is where I am. I think you said something that I also want to emphasize is that DeSantis's denial of the teaching is in itself an attack on our health, physical, spiritual, and cultural health, and that our wellness, where we continue to be denied an existence in this society and on the planet, that denial, you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
Generations old. And if you're not acknowledged, if you do not feel that you are loved, if you do not feel that you are human, all those things, you keep asking permission, you'll find many of us seeking, a place from that. And the seeking often turns into what we think of as drug use, addiction, looking for a place, one small place where I can feel something other than fear. So that's where I am. I'm deeply moved by the work now that is happening on many places, planes, and levels for us to look at our own, for the most part, post-traumatic slave syndrome.
Dr. Oliver Williams, thank you, brother, for being here. And let me just ask you to weigh in on the opening topics, and we'll take this conversation wherever it needs to go so that we have delivered, I think, a robust examination of what it means and how we adopt practices that reflect our commitment to our own health and healing and our responsibility therein. Dr. Williams?
Well, Brother Al, when I think about DeSantis, the thing that's interesting to me about him is that his behaviors reflect a challenge that he has. How do you deny that gay people exist? How do you deny realities of populations of Black people? That has nothing to do with the Black people or the gay people. It has everything to do with him. That he's trying so hard to eliminate it from his consciousness. And he doesn't want anybody else to be able to deal with it or to respond to it. And this exclusion is something that I sort of noticed over time, with different groups, and the fact that what we have to, and what we've had to do over time is to accommodate that in terms of dealing with places that will be able to support us in our realities. I appreciate Mother Atum for the work that she's done within the community because, people can see themselves in the work that she provides. And then when we talk about cultural competence or inclusion, people see themselves in the services that are being offered, and their identity associated with that helps to, I think, support them, but I think also heals them. So when I think of DeSantis, I think of foolishness, but it hurts the people that he's trying to deny exists. And I think this juxtaposition of looking at all the other ethnic and cultural groups that are being acknowledged is an interesting thing, but also juxtaposing it against the ones that are being denied. And I think it's important for us to be able to find ways. I've been watching these things, talking about how people have done different sets of things. Was the 1619 Project is an example, or programs that exist that deal with cultural identity that people find themselves to and find their voice, and looking at that historically, over our history within the United States, but also in terms of, my age, and our age, as we sort of define things that deal with our relevance. And some of it's discovery for people, but some of it is where people get connected and get supported in terms of their reality. I think about how the Black Panther movement ended up doing things to be able to support the community, or things in terms of Black history. When I used to have enough hair to have an afro. That was something that was important, that it was a hairstyle that was different, but dealing with our realities. And somebody said that they looked at young people, and we know how important Emmett Till was within our history, but that there are a lot of people who didn't know who Emmett Till was. I remember teaching that I had a diversity class that I was teaching, and trying to let people know, young people know who were in my class, who he was, and why it was important to know who he was, but all the other issues that were associated with it and things that were denied. I mean, I keep talking about, growing up in the 60s and in the Detroit riot, and how they used to define things. And they said it was a race riot. Mm-hmm. I guess if you say that there were a lot of white people that came into the Black community as either a National Guard or policemen, or the instigators,
vigilantes, yeah.
Vigilantes, but also vigilantes that were connected with the police.
Right.
There's a group, as I mentioned before, called Stress, that came in and initiated it, that resulted in the Detroit riot. Mm-hmm. But, my colleagues at the school I went to didn't see it that way, because some of their fathers were white policemen. They came into the community and they called it a race riot. But when you look at how it was cordoned off, it was within the city of Detroit.
Well,
in a particular location.
Let me take that observation back to the question of Governor DeSantis. And you started off by saying, you used the term, his personal story is a story of exclusion. Right. And it's really about him more than about us, but his policy and practice is exclusionary.
Right.
And my question, what I want you to comment on, is that really, from our point of view, it really is not just about him, right, because his policy, practice, activity is the work of the culture.
Right.
And so it's bigger than an individual being dumb or stupid or misinformed or miseducated. It really is a reflection of that person's conforming to.
That's right.
And building out, actually defending that entire institutional cultural structure. And so what's the lesson for us? I mean, how do we pay attention to not only this as a failure of an individual human being, and I don't know if it's a failure, he's intentional. He's doing what he intends to do. We just look at it for what it is, but how do we deal with that for both the individual and the cultural implications?
Well, Mother June?
Well, I think that the question, Brother Al was actually referring to you, because, so if you want to go first, otherwise I can, but please.
Well, to me, when he had, like you said, his policies have, because he's the governor, influenced the whole state. He's trying to run for president, and his policies and Trump's policies affect the state or the country. Mm-hmm. And he's trying to get them to sort of adopt that. And I think there's something about diversity where and historically, one reality is the fact that what we would do is we would give less attention to the impact of diversity, what some people said, that Social Security used to be structured in such a way that Black people didn't live to be a certain age. So there was resources that were, but they had to pay into it nonetheless. And that people that benefited from it were people who were non-Black. And so, or non-people of color. And so when I think about DeSantis, Trump, the Republicans historically, it's been a thing where diverse communities weren't included or were able to reap the benefits in ways that white people were. I think about legacies at universities. You know, I'm not, that one of the things that what we were trying to do is to have affirmative action programs, but people had legacies, and there were folks that benefited from that without question. And so the impact of it had with regard to the policies, I think, does have something to do with the make of the person and their thinking and what they decide to exclude.
Yeah. So may I, Mr. McFarlane, I think that the points that are being made are really important. One of the specific ones that I have been really studying and working with, though, is there's a book called Dying of Whiteness. And Dying of Whiteness is written by a physician. And basically his point is that the resentment, the fear of others that is in the psyche of whiteness, and whiteness in this case is the people across the planet, you know, who have allowed whiteness to become the course of their identity. It is the foundation of their identity. So people have given up culture in many, many cases and taken whiteness, which is a racialized version of their humanity. But the thing that racialized version does is, instead of generating the kind of confidence that should be coming from the fact that you rule the world, there is a deep, deep level of fear that you're also going to lose the rulership because you don't have anything on which to establish it. So whiteness is a false concept that has had a tremendous impact on the people who have had to adopt whiteness and become white. So this is a physician who says that whiteness, people will buy into, invest in whiteness to actually save their control. And they literally give up their lives in order to resist other people being alive. So that's what I'm hearing Dr. Oliver talk about, which is, and so we need to go into the levels of this that really show us that this is a inter, and continuous generational effort to stay alive by killing everything else that is alive. Do you see what I'm saying? So if you buy into death, this is the buying into death, a death trap.
Versus life.
You don't know what life looks like. So you can't create. I would suggest to you that the African, in the range of who we are, where we came from, and how we think about life, how we think about the divine in creation, how we connect ourselves to the divine in creation as a way for us to reproduce the divine in creation. Do you see what I'm saying? It has nothing to do with white people. It has to do with life on the planet. That is the foundational way that we, and more, we have to study that. How did we become? And the question is, how we became is also just a part of our being. So we have this concept of being and becoming. How we are today is a teaching for how we're going to be tomorrow. And how we are today is also a teaching and instruction for how we were yesterday and how we can't compare ourselves to people who do not have a concept of life in their spirituality. If they have no concept of life, they have no concept of life. And we have been the the product of that for over 2,000 years. Do you see what I'm saying? So I'm suggesting that we look at DeSantis as being a member of this group who will die for whiteness rather than allow, if he had any control over it, which he doesn't, blackness to live and be what it is on the planet. You see what I'm saying?
That's deep, 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 deep.
So it's
Yeah.
it's a study that we are currently doing and beginning to have the intellectual scholarship and capacity to name, which
Yep.
gives us a chance to really both survive, thrive, build our own creative. You know what the creativity is like among this generation right now. The creativity has never been higher for us. Well, I should say never, but continues now to flourish, which gives us the capacity to know, not think and ask permission, but I know we're going to live.
And to do it.
I know this generation will be able to bring forward life, which will be at the hands and in the hands of Black people.
Let me thank Mike V for listening and making a comment. He said, we have to accept that DeSantis is waging a civil war against us, and we have not come with a formidable response, as this is an extensional, I think he means existential threat to our humanity. And he says since Reconstruction, but you've already framed it as beyond Reconstruction, that this challenge is much more so as you were talking, Mother Atum, for some reason the thought popped in my head, the song popped in my head by Billy Paul. It was on the album that was famous for the record, Me and Mrs. Jones, I guess it was, but the song that was and the title of the album was The Time Has Come for the War of the Gods. The time has come for the war of the gods. That's kind of how it sounds. And the music kind of puts you in a dimension of the cosmos and of the space and of the spirit. And again, the lyrics are, the time has come for the war of the gods. And you described two quintessentially conflicting viewpoints of ideation or of the world. One, I hear you saying, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is a strategy based on death, and a strategy based on death, maybe not for death's sake, but to control and to manage and to keep power and to keep what is felt to be owned, deserved, and at risk.
Yes.
That in a place where there's another way of ideation that is based on the principle of life, living, regeneration, and the infinity, and that system at one level or another exists without regard to the evil and the negativity of the other system, but that they both exist is the fault line of the conflict in the world. Am I going too far with that, Mother Atum?
Of course you're not. I would go back to this Dr. Jonathan, who is really studying himself and his people. And one of the books that he has written is also called The Protest Psychosis, which is how schizophrenia became a Black disease. And I think I'm putting those out because as a part of the study that we are doing at the Cultural Wellness Center is, number one, we cannot compare ourselves or allow other people to compare us as far as our living, our life expectancy, our potentiality as it relates to living and how long and so forth. We cannot be compared to the white or the European or any of the cultures that have a very different set of resources, which we can both survive, thrive, and the resiliency involved in that. So we can't allow the comparison. The other thing about it, though, is that we have to study ourselves. We have to study ourselves. The books that have to be written now have to be on Blackness as it has come into existence from the beginning of time throughout time, no matter what the other situations are. When you talked about the coexistence of the evil and so forth, in Kemet, they talk about Asar and the Seth and Nephet. And this is a part of the creation story that speaks to the contradiction and the driving force, the unrelenting driving force of this contradictory to life force. So what we then begin to see is that we have an amazing story to tell about what happens before death, during death, and after death. And that's what gives us this amazing capacity for resilience in life. Does that make sense? And I know when we talk about this, it always seems like something very distant from us. But to be honest with you, day to day, I'm seeing examples, feeling examples, and in my own existence, knowing that that's what has kept me alive for 79 years. Just knowing that there is something beyond what this society has put out there as the only thing to know.
And so what I'm hearing and feeling and seeing in your words and thoughts, expressions, Mother Atum, is the idea that within us is a breadth and a depth, a capacity to not only continue and even more bountifully as we study and as we know ourselves with intention, but even without that, with that being hidden from us in part, we with intuition still possess and operate from a sense that the world we are in, based on the truth of regeneration, also accommodates the limited framework of the opposing force, which is focused on death. We understand that too, and we accept it as part of the all and part of the whole. On the other hand, that is so focused that it doesn't and fights against our sense of knowledge, of continuity, and of regeneration as the nature of existence. And am I on the right track?
You're on the right track. And I think very simply stated, as you did, that if you think about the people, once again, I say of the first time, and there is no denying that where, quote unquote, life began. Even their particular geographical, they will support that. What we need to study, in my mind, is the continuation of that in spite of the existence of a force that is that does not come from life. And I think, once again, and so what I think about with Brother Elder Ancestor Du Bois talks about this dual consciousness. When you put it in the context of healing, it is that duality that has now in the medical field become described as schizophrenia. And so schizophrenia then becomes, and bipolarism and those kinds of mental health conditions that for the most part, people have studied to see that, yes, they do get diagnosed, in many of us, more frequently than it do others, other people. So what I'm saying is, what is our best way of thinking, being, and becoming has also in this society operated against our existence. And that's the piece that we can change. We can reconcile ourselves with ourselves. We can reconcile ourselves with our soul. And it isn't become a woo-woo kind of process, but every single day that we stand up in the morning and greet the sun, it is an example of how we exist in the same continuity as the sun and the moon and the stars and so forth. And so those are real scholarly ideas that come from us and now must come back to us, because we've been tricked into thinking that there is no existence other than what they have been able to describe.
I guess one thing I think about is that there are hurdles that we have to overcome, because there and hurdles so there are people who have the knowledge that you're offering, Mother Atum, that can embrace that and be healed from it. But there are a lot of people that don't go to the places where they can not only buy into that example and live it, but I think another thing too, there are places in different locations that is supporting health and healing, and there are other places that aren't. And I think about, so going to Africa has been healing for me. When people say welcome home, it's been healing for me. But I also see places in Africa and in some of those countries where the destruction comes from, depending on what part of Africa you're in, come from white people to Black people, but also within Black communities and in different tribes, because some people want to be superior to other people in those countries. And as a consequence, that produces unhealthy behaviors. So I think one thing is, how do we take information to places so people can absorb it and heal from it? Mm-hmm. Versus, so dealing with the rigidity of it, I think. Mm-hmm. Where people don't do so well. Mm-hmm. And I think that in the United States in particular, when you see DeSantis, that's a hurdle. When you see Trump, it's a hurdle. When you see generally Republicans, it's a hurdle. And when you deal with racism in our history within the United States, it's a hurdle. But the civil rights movement, even though it's had its challenges in terms of dealing with people who are heterosexual, people who are homosexual, dealing with women, who've had challenges with some of those things too. The commonality of experience helped to drive us where we seemed to be on a similar page, because we understood what we were going through, and in some ways we united, in other ways. So I don't know.
But Oliver, I think the only thing I would say quickly is that, the thing that you have described exists right here in our, in our lives on a day-by-day basis. I mean, I think there are people who, at this point in time, we have to go to them and be as simple and as clear as possible in the fact that I and they are one. Anything that I have said today, I try to show it when I'm with someone who don't want to hear what I just had to say. What they want to see is my capacity as an older woman, as a Black woman who have lived, once again, I say, all these years, can I embrace them? And the point is that my children include people from various experiences. And those experiences in many cases, in many cases, are not, they don't bring me something that I already know about. They bring me stuff that I don't know about. And so whether I'm talking about, we are involved with a very amazing person, amazingly creative person who died a few days ago. We get to celebrate a person who is as creative as anything you've ever wanted to see, is also trans, is also in our community, recognizing ourselves as a people who can hold whoever our people are and are becoming. And that's what I have to show and practice, not necessarily talk about, because I'm not always on Brother Al's show. I am on the street corner, being protected, and at the same time studied by the brother, sister people who are of African descent, checking me out to see if Do I really know who we are?
Mm-hmm.
And can I really tolerate it?
Mm-hmm.
That's the test right now that we're experiencing. And
Mm-hmm.
I think, to be honest with you, that's the work on a day-by-day basis I have to do.
Yeah.
Let me use this moment to pivot to you again, Mother Atum, to talk about the 2023 Black Legacy and Leadership Enrichment Initiative. It's an opportunity for us to go down the path you're describing right now with some resources. So would you talk about that, tell what it is, what it's about, and why we should be involved, concerned? What does it do? What does it mean for freeing us, for our freedom?
Well, I think what it does is, once again, the Black Legacy and Leadership Enrichment Initiative is a partnership between the Polat Family Foundation and the Cultural Wellness Center and the community. Many community members who are activists and organizers, people who are on the front line, people, as I said, who are on every corner experiencing what we are all describing here in somewhat of a theoretical manner. But these are people who are facing and experiencing and who are working on these things day by day by day. And in many cases, not being recognized, certainly not being given any quote unquote cash as a resource. The resource they get is usually, as I have indicated earlier, spiritual, yes, but they are not being invested in and given the time to rest. This is an initiative that was described by activists and organizers who are members of the Polat Family Foundation's Racial Justice Committee. They said to Polat Family Foundation, since you are really thinking about what now to invest in, what do you now, following Brother George Floyd's uh, 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 departure, his death, his murder, all of the instructions that we received from that, what do you now do as a part of your quote unquote repentance, as a part of your enlightenment? And so Paulette Family Foundation really, the family with the Social Justice Committee came up with this idea that this is an investment they want to make. They want to make an investment in the enrichment, the leadership enrichment, the legacy, and they want to invest in people having time to rest. They want to have an investment in people having time to rebirth, revive, and at the same time, stay connected in the community and continue their work. So that's what this is about. It is a pilot. The Black Leadership and Legacy Enrichment Initiative is a pilot, but it's a 3-year pilot. That's another phenomenal thing about it.
Mm-hmm.
We get each year for 3 years to really work with 7 initiates who have submitted applications, been selected, been screened and selected by, again, Cultural Wellness Center and some other members of the community, and then get a year to work with themselves to determine what will help me to rest, what will give me the time that I need to take care of myself, what will afford me the time to take a little trip, or as a matter of fact, to sleep late and not have to get up. Some of these things are very basic that people want to do. And they get a really great sum, $55,000 for themselves. It is money that they get to determine what the use of the money is, and they get $15,000 to work with community to invest once again in a community project that is a joint venture between the person and the community group and community organizations that they work with. So in a nutshell, I think I've covered mostly of those things, but I think the thing I did forget to say, which I shouldn't forget to say, is the Cultural Wellness Center was selected by community to do this. We are very grateful to Black people who are hardworking, creative, amazing Black people to select us. We are very honored to be a part of this. And the Paulette family has been very active in the process in partnering with the Cultural Wellness Center and making sure that we never forget the community is the primary partner.
When you say rest, it reminds me, I was reading, editing an article that we're going to be publishing in a few days from the interview I did a couple weeks ago, or maybe just before Christmas, with Brother Repa Mecca. And
Yes.
I was going over the text. I think the article is going to be printed like in our issue of the 30th of December. But going over the text with the editor who I'm writing on it, and he talked about there was a comment about rest. And
Yes.
sometimes when I'm in the interview, I'm so focused that stuff gets past me. So when I saw it in writing, I sent a note back to the editor that I have doing the story, saying, I'm highlighting this one phrase. It talked about rest. What does that really mean? And here it is again.
Yes.
And you now have answered the question that I asked my editor to discover what we talked about. And the good thing is that Repa Mecca referred to you and the Cultural Wellness Center as part of his making, his growing, and his becoming that has led to his phenomenal work on behalf of creating wealth and resilience and self-sustainability in our community. So talk about these connections. I mean, and talk about, if you don't mind, we got short on time, but this is an opportunity. In part, I hear you and see you redefining the relationship between our community and our identity and our own, what's the right word for it, agency, and other entities outside of our community that have approached us either as philanthropy or as government, as a social structure. And instead, we are reshaping those relationships. It's a different negotiation. What do you think about that?
Well, first
That's my observation.
Yeah, Brother Repa and Brother Resma are very, very, very indicative of the work that we have all done together. We have reclaimed our own selves and our souls together. Mm-hmm. And yes, I'm certainly an older member of the community of people who have been working on this, but together we did. And together we also, the Cultural Wellness Center is a place, a space where that can happen. Many, many leaders and what we sometimes call fellows, or what we sometimes call, what we have right now is these initiates. The community members were the ones who ended up describing this. They didn't want it to be fellows. They wanted it to be something indicative of the being and becoming process. So this initiatic process became initiates for the same reason that Brother Repa and Brother Resma, have become amazing teachers, representatives of both building health, wealth, culture as knowledge, a resource.
Knowledge.
And what we call the 3 C's, both of them practice it all the time. We have to have culture, connections. Do you see what I'm saying? We have to have this cash, culture, and connections. And both of them are dedicated to that kind of development as the Cultural Wellness Center becomes, once again, the beneficiary of the work that people like them do. One final thing, moving from race to culture is what we now have really identified as being consistent with, and actually, as a matter of fact, those who go through Brother Resma's courses come to us to now take moving from race to culture, because he has prepared them to deracialize themselves and deracialize their soul and their heart. And then they can come to us and begin to study what that means, both people of African descent and of European descent and various other cultural backgrounds. So they are all, and again, as you know, my own children, I have to mention my 3 sons, Anthony, Robert, and Nevin. There's nothing that gives me greater joy than the fact that they actually respect me. They respect me. They talk to me. They listen to me. they work with me. This is the deepest honor that I can name, because when your children say to you, I thank you, I'm telling you, that is the healing practice that we want to promote and build. And people who are as big as Brother Resma, as big as Brother Rapa, who would name us, is like my children also naming me. That's what we're restoring here. And the people who come through this and as an initiate, we want them to say the same thing on the other side of the year, that it was re-energizing. They have more faith now in themselves and their people. And they have been given a chance, not because anybody has to give them a chance, but they have been invested in resting, which is a radical, resting is a radical act for people of African descent. And that's what we're doing, is resting and investing in that rest in order to produce wealth and other things on the other side. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
As the spirit would have it, my daughter is here. You all know Batala McFarlane. She's the publisher of Insight News and my partner in business as well with my family. So, that really reflects all of that. She said, let me get in the picture. I said, come on. Jump in. Hey, Batala, how you doing?
And I just wanted to say Happy New Year, and thank you for your all the work that you do for community and your words of wisdom. And absolutely, so thank you, Dad. We appreciate you, and it's just, I think I walked in at the right time, something that I need to hear to just lift my soul. Yes. And, I work closely with my brother, Anthony, love him too. And so just sending out some love to the world.
Yes. Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Batala.
Thank you,
So
Batala.
not planned, but that's the way the spirit works sometimes. And
That's right.
that's a good thing.
That's right.
I love this direction in conversation, Dr. Williams and Mother Atum. And I think we have to continue this conversation until we make it part of the vocabulary that's available to all of us, and vocabulary that will allow us to create a narrative. And the narrative is a narrative of our own inner experience, our legacy, our history, and a narrative that is of a future in which we win. And I say win, not in the sense that it means conflict, but win in the sense that fulfillment occurs. And the fulfillment that we are seeking, I believe, is fulfillment for every human being, not just human beings, but for every living thing, and not just for the living, but for the non-sentient as well. One that reflects and respects the value and purposefulness of everything in existence. I think that's a path of enlightenment and a path of genuine, ongoing, unending healing and being.
That's
being
correct.
And healing.
That's correct. Mr. McFarlane, I just want to say also that the Polat family is really open and ready for the kind of work that we all think that people of European descent should be ready to do. That when you think about philanthropy, there are lots of people who are trying to decolonize philanthropy or decolonize art. And this is another example where we can take the leadership and at the same time have something and build something that's both for ourselves and for the broader society. And we can think about and work together to think together about how do we invest with some of the cash or the other resources that people have accumulated, and have it clear that we can do that together. And that's what this is also an example of.
Will you come back soon and often?
Yes.
To keep having this discussion. We're out of time. This is a wonderful conversation. Dr. Williams, Sister Mother Atum Azzahir, thank you so much. I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation. We'll see you next time.